He walked into that room and didn't recognize the woman standing by the window, but she recognized him instantly because he wasn't just a stranger. He was the man who once promised to love her forever. The snow was falling softly outside the glass, drifting down over the mountains like the world was moving on without me. I stood there pretending to watch it, but my heart was pounding too hard for me to see anything clearly. I could feel him behind me. Even without turning around, I knew it was Rowan. The same man who used to hold my face in his hands and tell me I was his home. The same man who once whispered my name like it was the only thing keeping him alive. But when I finally turned to look at him, his eyes didn't soften. They didn't light up. They didn't recognize me at all. He looked at me the way someone looks at a stranger who just walked into their life, and something inside my chest cracked. I wanted to speak. I wanted to say his name, to remind him of everything we were. But my throat tightened, and all I could do was stand there, holding back the tears that were burning behind my eyes. Because in that moment, standing in the same room with the man I loved more than anything, I realized he had no idea who I was.
Rowan finally spoke, and when he did, his voice was calm, polite, almost kind. But it wasn't his voice. It wasn't the voice that used to wrap around my heart and make me feel safe. "Are you the one they sent to help around the house?" he asked, as if he were speaking to someone he had just met. The words hit me harder than I expected. I nodded slowly, afraid that if I tried to say anything else, my voice would give me away. "Yes," I whispered. I'm here to take care of things." He studied me for a moment, like he was trying to place my face somewhere in his memory. For just a second, I thought maybe something was stirring inside him. But then his eyes went distant again. "Good," he said quietly. "I don't usually like people in my space, but I suppose I'll manage." I forced a small smile, even though it hurt, because once upon a time, this wasn't just his space, it was ours. I watched him turn back toward the window, staring out at the falling snow like the world was something he was trying to remember but couldn't quite reach. And standing there behind him, I realized something that made my heart ache even more. I hadn't just lost my husband. I had lost the only person who ever truly knew me. Rowan kept his distance after that. He moved through the house like I was just another piece of furniture, something that existed but didn't really matter. We passed each other in the hallways, sat in the same rooms, listened to the same fire crackle in the evenings. And yet, it felt like miles stretched between us. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking, his eyes narrowing slightly, like he was trying to solve a puzzle that refused to make sense. Once I dropped a glass in the kitchen, and when it shattered, he rushed over without thinking. His hands grabbed my wrists gently, checking if I was hurt. For just a moment, his touch felt familiar, natural, safe. Then he pulled back as if he'd touched something he wasn't supposed to. "I'm sorry," he said, clearing his throat. "I didn't mean to." But he never finished the sentence, and neither did I, because we both felt it, that invisible thread that still connected us, even if he couldn't remember why. I started to notice it in the smallest moments, the way Rowan's eyes lingered on me when I laughed, the way his voice softened when he said my name.
Ilara. He didn't say it like a stranger would. He said it like it still belonged to him. One evening, we sat in the living room, the snow drifting slowly past the windows while the fire flickered between us. Neither of us spoke. There was no need to. But suddenly he rubbed the side of his head, his brow tightening like something inside him was trying to break through. "Do you ever feel like," he began, then stopped, "like you know someone, even when you don't remember them?" My heart stuttered. I swallowed. "All the time." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a second, the man I loved was right there in his eyes. "I don't know why," he said quietly, "but when you're here, it feels like something inside me is finally quiet." And that was when I knew, even if his mind had forgotten me, his heart never had. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, and my heart was too loud. So I sat by the window, watching the snow fall, and I let myself remember. I remembered Rowan standing in this very room, holding my hands like they were something precious. I remembered the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching, like I was the only thing in the world that made sense. We hadn't had a big wedding, no crowds, no music, just the two of us, promising forever in whispers. I could still hear his voice. "I choose you, Ilara, always." A tear slid down my cheek as I pressed my palm against the glass. He was still here, so close, but everything that made us us was gone. Or so I thought, because somewhere deep inside Rowan, the man who loved me was still fighting his way back. She arrived the next morning, elegant, confident, and far too familiar with Rowan. I was in the kitchen when I heard her voice, light, bright, and easy, the way someone sounds when they believe they still belong. "Rowan?" I froze. She stepped into the room with a smile that faded just slightly when she saw me standing there. "Oh," she said softly, "I didn't realize you had company." Rowan came in behind her, his hand brushing the small of her back in a way that felt too natural. "This is Mara," he said. "She's someone I used to know." Someone. The word made my chest tighten. Mara looked at him, then back at me. Her eyes lingered just a little too long, as if she were already measuring me. "I heard about the accident," she said gently to him. "I thought maybe you might need someone who remembers who you were." Rowan hesitated, and in that hesitation, I felt something cold settle in my heart, because for the first time since he forgot me, I wasn't the only woman standing in his world anymore. Mara stayed. She moved through the house like she already knew where everything belonged, like she'd never left. And Rowan, he let her. They laughed together, shared memories I couldn't hear, sat closer than they should. I told myself it shouldn't hurt. After all, to him, she was someone from his past, and I was just the woman who helped around the house. But it did hurt. It hurt more than anything I'd ever known. One evening, I stood quietly by the window, watching the snow fall as their voices drifted through the room behind me. Rowan laughed. That sound used to belong to me. I pressed my hand to my chest, trying to keep my heart from breaking out of it, because every time he looked at her, it felt like he was slowly forgetting me all over again. That night, I went back to the room I'd been staying in and closed the door quietly behind me. My hands were shaking as I opened the small box I had kept hidden for so long. Inside it was the ring, our ring, the one Rowan had slipped onto my finger with a smile that had promised me forever. I held it in my palm, staring at the tiny circle of gold that carried every memory of us. "I'm still here," I whispered, though no one could hear me. "I'm still your wife." A tear fell onto the ring, and I quickly wiped it away, afraid even that might erase him. Because if he didn't remember me, then this little piece of metal was the only proof that our love had ever existed at all. Rowan found the ring by accident. It was sitting on the counter where I must have left it in my rush to hide it. I heard his voice from the other room. "Ilara?" My heart stopped. I walked in slowly, and there he was, standing by the kitchen island, holding the ring between his fingers like it was something fragile. "Where did this come from?" he asked quietly. I couldn't answer, because the moment his eyes landed on it, something changed. His expression shifted, confusion melting into something deeper, something painful. "I've seen this before," he whispered. I don't know where, but it feels like it belongs to me." He pressed the ring into his palm, closing his eyes like he was trying to pull a memory out of the darkness. And suddenly he staggered back, gripping the counter. Images flickered behind his eyes. Snow, laughter, hands entwined, my voice calling his name. "Ilara," he breathed. Hearing him say it like that almost broke me, because for the first time since he forgot me, he was starting to remember. Rowan looked at me like he was seeing me for the very first time, and the last. "What did you do to me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I stepped closer, my hands trembling. "I didn't do anything to you," I said softly. "You left me, and then you forgot." He shook his head slowly, like he didn't want to believe it. "No, that's not—" His voice cracked. "I wouldn't just leave you." Tears burned in my eyes. "You didn't mean to," I said. "You were trying to get back to me. The accident happened on your way home." The room felt too small suddenly. "You were coming to find me, Rowan, because we were married." The words hung in the air like something sacred. Married. He stared at me in shock. "That's impossible," he said. I reached into my pocket and placed the ring in his hand. "This is yours," I said. "You put it on my finger and promised you'd never let me go." His fingers curled around it. And then he broke. Rowan stood there staring at the ring in his hand, his knuckles white as if he were afraid it might disappear. "I don't understand this," he said quietly. "You're telling me my entire life, my marriage, everything I was is just gone?" I stepped closer, my heart pounding. "Rowan, I'm right here." He looked up at me, and for a moment I thought he was going to take me in his arms, but instead, he took a step back. "I remember pieces," he said, pressing his fingers against his temple. "Your face, your voice, the snow, a promise I can't quite hear." His eyes filled with frustration. "But I don't remember being your husband." That hurt more than anything he could have said. "I want to believe you," he whispered. "I really do. But what if this is just my mind filling in the blanks? What if I'm reaching for something that isn't really there?" Before I could answer, footsteps echoed behind us. Mara stepped into the room. Rowan turned to her, confused and shaken. "Mara, do you remember me being married?" She hesitated, just for a second, and that was all it took. "No," she said softly, "you were never married, Rowan." My heart dropped. Rowan looked back at me, pain and doubt twisting across his face. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. I can't trust this yet." And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Even with the truth standing right in front of him, he still wasn't choosing me. Rowan didn't look at me when he turned toward the door. "I need time," he said quietly. "I need to figure out what's real and what isn't." Mara was already reaching for her coat. "I'll go with you," she said, her voice gentle, reassuring. "You shouldn't be alone right now." I watched them move toward the door together, my heart breaking with every step they took. "Rowan?" I whispered. He paused for just a moment, his hand on the door. "I'm sorry," he said without turning around. And then he left. The door closed behind them with a soft, final sound. I sank slowly to the floor, the snow still falling outside the windows as if nothing in the world had changed. But everything had, because the man I loved had just walked out of my life. And this time, it wasn't because he forgot me. It was because he didn't believe me. Rowan and Mara didn't get far. They were barely down the mountain road when Rowan's phone started ringing. He ignored it at first. Then it rang again and again. Finally, irritated, he answered. "Yes?" A voice came through the speaker, anxious and urgent. "Mr. Hale, this is the hospital. We've been trying to reach you. We located some of your missing personal effects from the night of your accident." Rowan's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Like what?" "There was a wallet, a jacket, and a small velvet ring box. We believe it belonged to your wife." Rowan slammed on the brakes. "My what?" Mara turned toward him, her face draining of color. The voice continued. "The woman who brought you in that night said you were frantic, calling her name over and over. Ilara." Rowan felt his chest tighten. "Ilara?" He slowly turned to look at Mara. "You told me I was never married." Mara swallowed. I didn't want you to get confused." "You lied," he said quietly. And in that moment, everything started to fall apart. Rowan didn't remember all at once. It came in waves. The snow, the road, his phone in his hand, Alara's voice crying his name. He saw himself rushing through the storm, panic in his chest because he was late. "I'm coming home, Alara, I promise." The crash, the darkness, and then her face. Tears, fear, love. He remembered slipping the ring onto her finger in this very house, his hands shaking as he told her she was his forever. "I chose you," he whispered in the car. "I chose you."
Mara was silent beside him. Rowan didn't look at her again. He turned the car around.
The snow was falling harder when Rowan returned. Headlights cut through the white as his car pulled into the driveway of the mountain house. I was still sitting on the floor near the window, staring at nothing when I heard the door. At first, I didn't believe it, but then I heard his voice. Alara. I looked up slowly. He was standing there, breathless, snow clinging to his hair and jacket like he had fought the storm to get back to me. I remember, he said, his voice shaking. I remember us. I remember you. My heart jumped and then hesitated. You left, I whispered. I know, he said, stepping closer, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. But I was confused. I was scared. I didn't know what was real. He stopped a few feet away, afraid to touch me. I do now. The fire crackled between us, and for the first time since he forgot me, Rowan was finally standing in front of me again. I didn't run into his arms, not right away, because even though Rowan stood there remembering me now, my heart was still trembling from everything it had survived. You don't get to forget me, I said softly, my voice shaking, and then walk back into my life like nothing happened. He nodded, tears in his eyes. I know, and I don't deserve you, but I love you, Ilara. I loved you before the accident, and I love you now, even with all the pieces missing. I took a slow step toward him. You broke me, I whispered, and I stayed anyway. He reached out, careful, like he was afraid I might disappear. Then let me spend the rest of my life proving I won't ever leave you again. My breath caught, and finally I let him pull me into his arms. The snow continued to fall outside the windows,